el presidente de los Estados Unidos.
Mr. Mr. President, fellow supporters of Dawn Netsch, elected officials, it is my great honor to introduce the next governor of the state of Illinois, one who I work closely with as state senator, as state's attorney of Cook County, and mayor of the city of Chicago. She represents the best in politics and government. She ran a wonderful campaign. She tells the voters the truth on every issue. The next governor of the state of Illinois, with your help, Dawn Netsch.
Thank you all. Thank you all. We are so delighted you are all here. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Mr. President, I thank you for being here tonight. It is still tonight, right? No, we do understand, and we are just so very pleased to have you here. You honor us with your presence, and your presence certainly helped us to have a great event tonight. And all of these folks are still here. It's marvelous. So thank you very much. After all, we in Illinois can remind ourselves that second only to the state of Arkansas, we gave you the biggest margin in the November 1992. We take pride that we contributed significantly to your victory, and it was our victory also. Very much our victory. We Democrats retook the White House in November 1992, and we're going to retake the State House in November 1994. To Secretary Cisneros, to all of my fellow Illinoisans, and a special welcome and thank you to Governor Evan Bayh, who is the chairman of the Democratic Governors Association this year. And Governor Bayh, we understand that your presence here, I think, indicates that this race is a top priority for Democrats everywhere, so we are especially pleased. And to the Democratic team for campaign 1994 assembled here, and to those few who are lucky enough not to have to run this year, the two senators, we are united, we are strong, and we are the diversity of the Democratic Party. This is it, my friends. Most of all, let me thank all of you very warmly and literally from the bottom of my heart. It is your spirit, your enthusiasm, and not incidentally your money, that really keeps us fueled to go on and win this victory. And I cannot tell you how warmly I thank you all. And you've been marvelous to be here and stay here for so long this evening, too. So my thanks to you. You know, Jim Edgar said on television last night that we were having trouble raising money, and I look around this room, and I think he better come back and count the house again, perhaps. Governor Edgar, you are wrong, but that's not the only thing that you've been wrong about. But more importantly than that, campaigns are really not just about money. Campaigns are about ideas. And we have something that Jim Edgar does not have and never will have. I know what I stand for. The first thing that I stand for is a commitment to education, an honest commitment to education. Because I have an honest plan to fix our schools and to reduce our property taxes and to make our schools more accountable. I have told, and on top of that, I have told the voters how I plan to pay for my plan. And that is absolute honesty and absolutely essential. I stand for honest budgets. No more hidden deficits, no more shell games with our lottery money for schools, and no surprise tax increases after the election. Remember that, folks? And I stand for a tough ban on assault weapons. I worked for almost 20 years in the state Senate to get the ban on guns, to get the guns off our streets, and to make our streets safer. And I didn't need to read a public opinion poll to tell me that that was the right thing to do. On these issues and on many more, I will challenge Jim Edgar, and I'll debate him if I can only find him. We know he's around. He's on television every night, but we can't find him. And the problem is that no one really knows where Jim Edgar stands on anything. So I'm going to ask him a few questions tonight, if you'll bear with me just a moment. We will make due note of all these questions. And they're relevant questions, but they're tough questions. So first, Jim Edgar, you proposed a ban on 92 assault weapons, but then you quit as soon as the gun lobby and Pate Phillip objected. So I ask you, Jim Edgar, do you support your own assault weapons bill, yes or no? Jim Edgar, you said you were going to tear up the state's credit card and balance our budget. Yet we have a $1.6 million Medicaid debt, and I have several $100 million of unpaid bills every day. So I am. I'm trying. So my second question is, I ask you, Jim Edgar, are you ever really going to balance the budget? Yes or no? Jim Edgar, you promised to be the education governor, and yet the state's share of funding education is at the lowest level that it has been in decades. So, I ask you, Jim Edgar, are you ever going to live up to the state's obligation to provide for the education of its young people? Yes or no? You got it now, right. Jim Edgar, under your administration, the reductions in school aid have forced property taxes up through school districts. My plan will cut property taxes 10%. So I ask you, Jim Edgar, do you have a plan to cut property taxes by 10%? Yes or no? Right. And last but not least, Jim Edgar, in 1990, you said, "No new taxes, period." Well, you didn't keep that promise. And now, this year, you have made promises to fund the schools, to fix the problems at DCFS, to build roads, to pay off the deficit, and on and on and on. But you neglected to say how you're going to pay for it. So I ask you, Jim Edgar, are you going to promise not to raise taxes? Yes or no? I respect the voters enough to tell them what I plan to do before the election. Jim Edgar does not. So the choice is clear between a politician who won't say where he stands on the issues and a candidate who is willing to stand up and shoot straight and carry a real vision for Illinois. That's me. Now, right. Now, thank you very much. Now, thank you all. Thank you all very, very much. November the 9th, you will have the first part of her, and January the 14th, I think it is, you'll have the rest. So let's. All right, now it is my very great pleasure to introduce the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. He is a policy wonk who is also a Chicago political veteran and who, not so incidentally, ran the first successful Democratic presidential campaign we have had in a long, long, long time. He has brought new vigor and life and vitality to the Democratic Party. And let me just give you one quick illustration, which, Mr. President, you will remember. The bus trip following the Democratic National Convention, which absolutely started the campaign off on all highs. It was absolutely marvelous, and it was David Wilhelm's idea. And I was there in Vandalia, and I'll tell you, it was one of the greatest political events I've ever attended in my life. But David not only managed to put this event on the president's calendar, but he has been working at it consistently since then. And David, for your help, I owe you a very deep debt of gratitude. It is my pleasure now to introduce to you an old friend of mine and, one of us from Illinois, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, David Wilhelm.
Thank you. Thank you. This November, are we going to elect Don Clark Netsch, the next governor of Illinois? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes. They're catching on. All right, let's go. I'm carried away by the moment. I think I'll announce the convention choice right now. Just kidding. Now, thanks to all of you here tonight, we've raised $1 million for the Victory 94 Fund. But now we have a little icing for the cake, and I'd like to call on the great governor of the state of Indiana. Somebody asked me once if we were separated at birth. We were not. He's a little older than I am, but not much. I'm just glad there's somebody about my own age to hang out with. Governor Bai has a presentation to make to Don Clark Netsch.
I'm here this evening representing the 29 Democratic governors from across the United States of America who are looking forward to welcoming Dawn into our ranks next January. And I have a little challenge for everyone here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, if the state of Indiana can elect a Democrat governor, certainly so too can the great state of Illinois. Dawn, on behalf of your future colleagues and thanks to the great support of the President of the United States, who has been very generous to our organization, I'm pleased to make this contribution to your campaign to help get you started in the sum of $25,000. Congratulations to you. And we look forward to helping you in the future.
Don Clark Netsch has every politician in America trying to learn how to play pool. That ad is famous because it worked, and the reason it worked was that it was so obviously true. Don Clark Netsch is a straight shooter. She is tough. Now, I recently got to see a little bit of this tough side when Don Clark Netsch stayed with my wife, DG, and I in Washington, D.C. We all got back from an event around midnight. We were tired. We got in. I wanted to go out and meet some friends at a bar. It was a surly, rowdy group that included Bill Daley and David Axelrod. And to be polite, I asked Don Clark Netsch if she would like to come along. Don Clark Netsch said, "Sure, absolutely." And so over her evening gown, she put on her leather jacket and we went to the bar. Just kidding about the leather jacket part. Look, for 18 years, we have lived in Illinois under the rule of Republican governors. Now think about what that means. Think of the pain. Think what that means. That means that people, kids, have been born, raised, gone to grade school, junior high, and high school, and have never known anything but a Republican governor. I thought you might feel that way. Now, it never struck me how bad that was until I learned that my wife, DG, was pregnant. I am not about to let our child live under Republican governors the rest of his existence. It's time for them to go. Now let's get specific. It's time for Jim Edgar to go. He's playing the classic Republican game: do nothing, make no enemies, let things go bad, and then blame, 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 blame. Well, he's done nothing, and he's done it without vision, and he's done it without energy. Our schools keep getting worse, our property taxes keep going up, our children keep getting the shaft. So what is Jim Edgar's response to all that? He still does nothing, but he does go blame, and he does go and try to divide us. Downstate versus upstate, suburbs versus city, black versus white, rich versus poor. And he goes negative. He goes hard negative, and he goes early, and he clearly intends to go negative often. It's cynical. It's bad for Illinois. And this year, we're going to put a stop to it. Now, it is my honor to introduce to you a man who is not afraid to do something. A man who is not afraid to make a few enemies. A man who is willing to use up political capital to make change a reality. If there is one thing I've learned since I've had this job, it's this. It's this. The political dynamic is stacked against change. Here's why. Here's why. The people who have a stake in the status quo know who they are, they've got money in their pockets, and they're able to speak for themselves very easily. But who speaks for the checkout clerk who works at the Kmart in Peoria, who doesn't have health care coverage? Who speaks for the family in Moline that works hard and lives paycheck to paycheck and benefits from the earned income tax credit that we passed last year? Who speaks for the small business owner in Chicago that wants to cover his or her employees but can't because they're paying for somebody else's health care coverage? And who speaks for the sons and daughters of middle-class students who deserve a chance to go to college? This president fights for these people and for all those who believe that this nation can become better and stronger. And it's my great honor to introduce to you the President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
I thought when I got here, you'd be saying, Bill, make it short. We're about to starve. I want to thank you for waiting. I want to thank you for your enthusiasm, for your dedication, for your support. You know, I had to stay in Washington a little longer to do my job, the one you elected me to, and I was hoping you'd still be here when I got here tonight, and I was glad to see you. I want to thank Mayor Daley for his leadership of this city and for his strong support. I thank Chairman Wilhelm for that rousing introduction and his hard work. You know, he's just like a flower at night. When he comes to Chicago, he just blooms and starts talking. I may have to send 4 or 5 of you on the road with him everywhere so he can pump him up like that. I thank Senator Simon, Senator Mosley Braun, and Congresswoman Collins, and Congressman Bobby Rush. They are, in a very real sense, my partners for change, and I want to say a little more about that in a moment. I want to thank my former colleague and good friend, Governor Evan Bayh, who has done a better job as chairman of the Democratic governors than anybody in history. I can say that because I used to have the job, and he's done a better job than anybody in history doing it. I want to say a special word of thanks to one of my cabinet members who is here tonight, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Mr. Henry Cisneros. I want to thank him for the work he's done with the mayor and Vince Lane and everybody else to try to bring safety and sanity to public housing in Chicago and throughout the United States. We're going out to Robert Taylor Homes tomorrow to stick up for the right of people to be safe in their homes and to raise their children in safety. I am delighted to be here with this entire Democratic ticket and your state chair, Gary LaPel, and especially with Dawn Clark-Netsch. Boy, she's something, isn't she? I think the straight shooter is going to replace the comeback kid as the great marquee of 1994. I want to try to tell you a little bit about why I think this race for governor here is important, and partly in terms of what we're going through in Washington. You heard David talk a little bit about how the odds are stacked against change. They always have been, you know. Back in the Middle Ages, the great political philosopher Machiavelli said, "There is nothing so difficult in all of human affairs than to change the established order of things. Because the people who stand to lose know what they're going to lose, And the people who have a hope that things will be better are always afraid that it really won't work out that way. That has always been true. It is worse in America today because people have been disappointed for so long, because they have been through difficulties, and because we have a political environment in which things are often communicated to us in the most negative possible way. Those of us who are the forces of change and who believe in the prospect of a better tomorrow, therefore, have a heavy responsibility to keep our hearts up, our heads up, and to keep on fighting for what we believe in. You know, when I first came to Illinois running for president, I knew two things. One is I knew that even if I won in the South on Super Tuesday, I had to win on Illinois the next week or I couldn't be nominated for president. The other thing I knew is what Don Clark Nett said, which was even more important, was that I needed to have a reason to want to be president. You need to know why you want these jobs, and when you do, and when you work for it, and when that drives you every day, then you can fight for change, and you can live with the misunderstandings, and you can fight through the ups and downs, and you can keep on going because you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for you. And I looked at her up there giving that speech, and I told Mayor Daley, I said, you know something? She's really got it. Why? She has really got it. Because she has a reason that is bigger than herself to be governor. And because she is trying to build, not tear down, to unite, not divide, to talk about something good, not something bad. This matters. And it is what our country desperately needs today. We are still fighting through this because every time we win a victory, it's a one-day story, and the problems in the process are a one-week story. And we are dealing with an opposition that is deeply skilled at placing blame and claiming credit and running away when the tough decisions have to be made. Sometimes they remind me in Washington of that old sign I tell everybody about that I once saw on a back road in my state. It said, sign that was waving on a fence, it said, George Jones, veterinarian / taxidermist. Either way, you get your dog back. You know, well, you know, they don't really care as long as they can put blame and escape responsibility. Well, I ran for president to end blame placing and to assume responsibility. And I relish in the controversy change causes as long as we are moving. We were told last year by several nonpartisan surveys that the Congress of the United States and the President of the United States working together in 1993 accomplished more in the first year of a presidency that had been done in any time since World War II except President Eisenhower and President Johnson's first year. We had to fight partisan gridlock, special interests, and deeply embedded cynicism to do the things I ran for president to do, to try to restore the economy, to try to empower ordinary citizens and ask of them more responsibility in their citizenship, to try to rebuild the American community across the lines of race and income and region, and to try to make government work for ordinary people again. And we're off to an awful good start. Look what's happened to this economy. After years and years and years in which the deficit got bigger every year because nobody had the guts to make the tough decisions to bring it down, thanks to the people standing behind me in the Congress and the work we did together with no help, not a single solitary vote, not one from the other side. We reversed 12 years of favoritism for the wealthiest Americans, explosion of the debt, mortgaging our children's future, to turn that around. And what has happened? You know, they hate to admit it. They just scream tax and spend. If they're like a broken old record, they can't think of anything else to say. But the truth is, The deficit began to come down, interest rates went down last year, the economy began to move, and look what the record is. We've had 3.4 million new jobs in this economy in 17 months, 90% of them in the private sector, not government jobs. The deficit is going down, and when the Congress passes this bill, this budget, we will have 3 years of consecutive reduction in the government deficit, not under a Republican, but with a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress. For the first time, since Harry Truman was the President of the United States, 3 years in a row, the deficit will go down. And this Congress did it while increasing spending on education, increasing spending on Head Start, increasing spending on women's health research, increasing spending on new technologies for the 21st century to give us a better economy. That's the record that we have established. I will gladly run on it and defend it. They call it tax and spend. They believe they can just keep on saying the same old thing and somebody will believe it even if there are no facts to support it. I'll tell you what tax and spend was in this last budget. 1.2% of the American people paid higher income taxes, and 1 in 6 working American families got an income tax cut so they could keep working and stay off welfare and raise their children. That is what we did. More than 10 times as many Americans got a tax cut as got a tax increase. They talk about big government all the time. You know what the Democrats did? In 6 years, we're going to reduce the size of the federal government by 252,000. In 1997, the federal government will be smaller than it has been at any time since John Kennedy was the President of the United States, and we are going to spend all that money. We are going to spend all that money to finance the most important anti-crime bill in the history of this country and put 100,000 police back on the streets of the United States of America. Oh, I know all about gridlock, and you may still think it's alive and well, but I'm telling you, it took 7 years to pass the Brady bill, but we passed it last year. 7 years, family and medical leave language, but we passed it last year. 6 years for the crime bill, 7 years for the Worldwide Trade Agreement. We are breaking gridlock. And now, we are facing the biggest gridlock of all. We're going to try to see if we can reverse 60 years of failed attempts to bring America into the ranks of every other advanced country in the world and provide affordable health care to every American citizen. And my fellow Americans, it won't be easy. We have achieved some remarkable successes, passing the National Service Bill that will enable us. 3 years from now, there'll be 100,000 young people in America working their way through college by revolutionizing America at the grassroots level. We reorganized the student loan program. We are revolutionizing the unemployment system. We're going to pass important welfare reform, but it's very hard to change the health care system. Why? Because we are spending more money than any other country in the world and doing less with it. And why? Why? Because a lot of that money is going for things that have nothing to do with health care. And the $40 million or so that's been spent to convince the American people that our plan is bad for small business, is going to take something away from you and cost you more, is a pittance compared to what they are making out of it. But let me ask you this. If our system is so good, why are we spending $60 to $80 billion a year more on paperwork than any other system in the world? Why can't we figure out how to cover everybody? Why do we have so many children born into this world who don't have primary and preventive health care? Why do we have 81 million Americans living in families where because somebody has been sick in that family, they can't get health insurance, or they can't afford what they're being asked to pay, or they can never change a job? Why do we have tens of millions of Americans knowing at any time the hammer could come down and they would lose it? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because every time we get close to doing it, the interest groups that are so entrenched in the way things are doing scare the living daylights out of good, honest, small business people and other people and tell them, oh, this is going to be a terrible thing. Let me tell you something, folks. Before we got into this, before we ever asked Congress to pass a bill, we spent months and months and months, and I had already worked for years on this issue. We consulted thousands of doctors and nurses and business people, and we constructed a plan that would be good for small business, good for jobs, and most important, good for American families. So I want you to help us pass health care and welfare reform and the crime bill and keep the change going and prove that we can break gridlock. Yeah, we'll take on a lot of special interests, and yes, in the process, we'll be misunderstood, and yes, there'll be good days and good weeks and bad weeks. Why? Because when you are doing something, you don't have time to spend all your time trying to maneuver how you look. All I want to know is when it's all said and done, what we did. What we did. Now, the reason Dawn Clark Nash ought to be governor of Illinois is because if you hire her, she'll do something, sure as the world. She will do something. And with our adversaries all over America increasingly in the grip of extremists on the right, increasingly willing to say or do anything to demean and defame their opponents, increasingly willing to try to frighten the voters and obscure the facts and make politics about something other than bringing out the best in us and working together, we better stick with the doers and the fighters. The people that cut and run are going to be vanquished. The people who stand and fight for what's best in this country are going to be rewarded. You stick with us, and we'll have a victory in November. Thank you, and God bless you all.